Hi guys, it's Enigma State. On this video today I'm going to be giving you a bit of a walkthrough of some of the hardware that I've got in the studio. I get a lot of people asking me questions on how all the gear is connected, what equipment I'm using, what does it do. So I just thought I'd give you this video to kind of answer a lot of the questions that I get, and hopefully it'll give you a bit of an insight into how things work in my studio. So in the centre of the studio here I've got my PC, which is running on Cubase 13. I've always been a Cubase user going back to 2002. And to the sides here I've got two sets of studio monitors. Now these are passive and these are active, so these need an amplifier. These have got built-in amplifiers. So these ones here they're actually not Yamaha NS10M monitors, as the decal shows. So these are actually from Studio Spares. I bought them about 18 years ago, and they are clones of the NS10s. I actually done a side-by-side comparison with the NS10s a long time ago, and the comparison between them was so close. So yeah, just really good set of monitors. For the amplifier for the SN10, so I've got a Samsung Servo 200. Recently bought this from eBay. I actually had the older version of this, but it was that old, it was making noise. And then to the side I've got the active pair, which is from the same company, Studio Spares, but these are very different monitors, so it allows me to get a really good contrast between the two. These have got a lot more low end, kind of a little bit more colouring with the sound, but I mean I just know these monitors, so if I can get a good balance between the two monitors, I kind of know that my track is pretty much ready. To control the monitors I've got a Mackie Big Knob, which basically just allows me to switch between the two monitors and increase the volume up or down. For my audio interface I've got a RME Digiface. Now it's just these lights here at the top there, if you can see them. It's sat behind this. So the RME Digiface is, it doesn't have any inputs or outputs for these audio jacks, but it does have 4 optical inputs and outputs, which allows me to connect up to 4 of these ADAT units. Now the ADAT units will allow me to connect on each one 8 inputs and 8 outputs. So in total I can have up to 32 inputs and 32 outputs. So it allows me to connect quite a bit of gear. I've only got 2 at the moment. I've only recently upgraded to the RME Digiface from the Beringer UBXA 1820, but I will be getting another pair of these ADATs at some point soon. Coming over to here, I've got a Beringer JT4000, which is kind of like a little JP8000 toy synth machine thing. They're like 40 quid to buy. So good for the money. For 40 quid you can get some nice pads, leads, bass out of it. Yeah, so it's just a really cool little thing. I don't think it's anywhere near close to the JP8000, but for 40 quid you can't complain, it's really good. Then I've got my mixing desk, which is a Beringer SX3242. Now I use this kind of like a half and half, so the first half of this is connecting to the equipment here, and then the second half is connected to the outputs of my ADAT units, which allows me to be able to send any audio from Cubase into the mixing desk. So if I've got a VST loaded, or virtual synthesizer for some people who don't know, I can send that audio out into the ADAT, out to the mixing desk, and I can actually do faders, EQ and effects on the mixing desk, and then I can send it back into Cubase again as well. To the right here, so I've got a Roland TR8, which is kind of like an 808, 909, 606, 727, 707, I think as well. So it's kind of like all the classic Roland drum machines rolled into one. And then underneath I've got the Beringer clone of the 909 from Roland. It's such a great drum machine, this. It's kind of like a staple for any studio, I think. But yeah, it's a great drum machine. I've also got the Beringer clone of the SH201 from Roland as well. It's a great bass machine, bass synthesizer even. Get some really nice leads out of it as well. And then I've got over here the Beringer TD3 for 303. I've got the Beringer Crave, and I've also got the Donna B1, which is kind of like another TD3. In fact, it is another TD3. It does 303 sounds exactly the same. But the thing I like about this most is the fact that it's got a 2-octave key bed, so you can really sort of get into creating your patterns, and it's also got an onboard delay unit as well, which the TD3 doesn't have. And then here I've got my turntable, which I use for like sampling vinyl, which is connected into the mixing desk, and then I can record the sample into Cubase. And then underneath that I've got the Akai S3000 sampler. I've upgraded it from the floppy drive to the Gotek USB drive, but what I quite like about this is the fact that it still loads up the samples that you put onto the USB drive. It still sounds like it's a floppy disk. And then I've got underneath there, I've got two patch bays, which I was using mostly in my old studio. These days I'm more of kind of hybrid, so they're not used that much, but they're just that cheap to buy, and you don't get a lot for them to sell them, so they're just worth keeping hold of in case you ever need one. And then up here I've got both my vinyl that I've released with Trans Classics, so Pride and Joy on the shelf, but definitely will be more vinyl coming soon. And if I swing around here, so this is what I call the wall of synths. So if I just start from the top here, so I've got the Beringer Deepmind, which is kind of like a Juno 106, but with a brain in the middle. Amazing synthesizer, one of my favourites here. Yeah, it's kind of just an all-rounder, can do all sorts of different sounds, bass, lead, pads, you name it, it'll work. And then we've got here the Roland SH201. Now, I call this the poor man's JP8000, and the reason why is because the architecture of it is based off the JP8000, but there's just some features missing from it, but it still can do quite a lot of the JP8000 itself, and they're so much cheaper to buy than the JP8000. These are kind of, for me, this is probably the most underrated synthesizer, especially in the trance scene. And they go for about £200 to £300. It's just a really good synth, and it still does the super saw waveform. Now the benefit of this over the JP8000 is the JP8000 has got two oscillators in the same way as this has, but only one of them can have the super saw, whereas on this one you can have both of the oscillators as a super saw, which makes it as two super saw oscillators, and you can detune them against each other. Now the JP8000 doesn't have that, but you can have two super saw waveforms by using the upper and the lower split point of the synth as a super saw, but that's the maximum you can go, whereas on the SH201 you can have two oscillators on the lower for a super saw and two oscillators on a super saw for the upper, so it gives you four super saws. So yeah, it's very underrated synthesizer, but it's the synth that I've held for the longest. Certainly not the oldest synthesizer that I own, but for in terms of how long I've owned it for, this is the longest I've had, and I will never get rid of this synth. I'd even have two of them because they're just that good. And then underneath that I've got the Roland D10. Now this is an LA based synthesizer, and this was created in the 80s, and it was actually designed and built to compete against the DX series synthesizers. But if you've ever listened to anything from Michael Bolton, it's most likely come from the D series from Roland. It's quite a cool synthesizer. I actually bought this recently. I kind of bought it on a whim. It was £30. Somebody said it wasn't working. I picked it up, I brought it home, I gave it a try, and it was working barring one key, which I've got on order. So I'm going to replace the key and it'll be all working fine, but everything else works on it. So an absolute bargain for 30 quid. Then underneath that I've got the Beringer UBXA, which is a clone of the Oberheim OBXA. Now Beringer have kind of took the OBXA and then added some extra features like they do with all their synths. But for me, I mean, this is just an incredible synthesizer. The features that they've added to it just really enhances it. It's missing some effects on board, but it's nothing that I can't add on to it with a plugin. But yeah, it's just a really cool synthesizer. Some great brassy sounds, drones, bass, really deep pads. It's just a really, really good synthesizer. It's well built. It's so heavy. And it was actually bought from my lovely fiance, who got me this for my 40th birthday. So yeah, it was a really nice gift. So yeah, great synthesizer. Then coming up here we've got the Yamaha DX21. So this was another one that I bought on a whim, paid £60 for it. The person who had it didn't know how to get it working. I've generally only used this for one sound really, which is the solid bass, or also known as the lately bass. But yeah, you can get some really good bass sounds out of it, you can get some nice pluck out of it, but you can also get some really nice like FM pads and like guitar-y type sounds and plucks. So yeah, it's a really cool synth. Then I've got the Yamaha A1X, which was originally designed to compete against the JP8000. Now, if I'm being totally honest, I actually prefer this over the JP8000 in terms of its sound. Maybe not its sound design, given that it's a matrix-based editor, but once you kind of persevere with the editor on it, you can get some really amazing sounds on it. Underneath that, I've got something that's similar in terms of its design, but very different under the hood. So this is the CS2X, a similar type of editor, matrix design, but this is a sample-based synthesizer. So there's a lot of samples in here, ravey sounds and sort of just like one-shot sounds. It's quite a cool synth to have. And it's not anything else that I've got in the studio that's similar to that. So yeah, it's a really good piece of kit to have. Now underneath there, I've got the Novation Supernova 2. It is just an unbelievable synth, especially for trance, all sorts of sounds as well, and for different genres. But for me, it's an absolute beast for trance music. It's got 8 parts. You can have 8 different sounds on it. There's a track that I've got coming out soon, which is predominantly just produced on this synthesizer. So yeah, you can get all sorts on there: bass, leads, acids, pads, plucks, drums, you name it, it's on this synthesizer. I actually got this earlier this year as part of a swap for a JP8080. Now some people will call me crazy for doing that, but for me this synthesizer is just worth way more. I did have the Supernova 2 rack version of this, but I much prefer to have keys and like to be very hands-on. So I didn't really use the rack version as much, but I'm definitely getting the use out of the key version. And then over here, this is kind of like the new project that I've got in the studio. It's going into modular. So this is the Beringer Cat, which sits in that case over at the top there. It will eventually come out this once I've got more modules, but modules are basically just little pieces of equipment there that you plug in, and then you would use these points here to patch with these cables, so you could plug in from say over here into there, and you'll be able to feed the audio and stuff like that. So that's the new project that I've got ongoing at the moment, but I just need to buy more modules. And then over here is my DJ gear. So I've got a pair of Reloop RP4000s, some great turntables these. I mean, I wish I did have Technics, but they're just so expensive. But these are the next best things for me. I think they're just really good. Got a really quick stop start on them. So yeah, great pair of turntables, and then they're connected into my Pioneer DDJ-RX. So it allows me to have a blend of digital mixing and obviously vinyl mixing as well. And then you can see here's all my vinyl, as well as some down here where I'm sampling. I've got my MIDI controller, which is an Alesis VI61, so it's 61 key MIDI controller. There's a lot of buttons and knobs on there, but to be honest, I don't really use them. I just want to use it for playing. I can trigger any of the pieces of equipment in the studio from this with no issues at all. So all the synths on this wall are kind of connected. Obviously it's going to be a lot of wires, but they're connected up via loom cables, so it's kind of like quite thick pieces of cable. So the strands are all connected into the sort of the one sheath, and they run around here and then up into the interface. And the same with MIDI as well. I've got a 6 cable loom which will connect to different synths on here, unless it runs on USB, which that one and that one does. So I've got 5 connected here on the standard DIN MIDI, running a loom, running round, and then connecting into the M-Audio MIDI Sport MIDI interface thing. So it allows me to control and send MIDI to all the synthesizers. And that's pretty much my studio. I don't think there's anything else that I've not covered. I have a really nice mix of a old school / modern setup, so I get the best of both in here. That's my studio. I hope it's been useful for you. I hope that it's maybe answered some questions, or just maybe you're just curious how I would do things in the studio. But yeah, that's my studio. If you do have any other questions, drop it in the comments. Hit the subscribe button or like button, and I'll see you in the next video.